Great. So I'm going to get started with the land acknowledgement, everyone. So thank you for coming here. We are filming this, recording this on the unceded, occupied, unsurrendered territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And feeling lots of gratitude right now these days in the work we're doing in the downtown east side, which prior to us coming here used to be called Kamkamale, which means land of the great maples. And I say this also as a practice, if you are not from these lands of Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, we do invite you to put what territory you are on in the chat space. And if you don't know, maybe just the town or city, and our team can help facilitate maybe where those territories are. And so, like I said, we have deep gratitude for our host nations, amazing partners in the work we're doing in the downtown east side and into this next chapter that we're doing with our redevelopment. So wow, thanks so much for coming, folks. So many people are here today. We have some board members that are here. I saw Heather, I saw Elizabeth. I think there was Lauren was joining, and a David. We had some First Forward cabinet members. Don Evans was joining. We have Rudy, also our staff that have joined. If you are also a staff member, you can raise your hand with an emoji. It's typically our development and communications team that really helps facilitate this, get the invitations out, and do all the tech work. So big gratitude to Trista, Sarah, Alice, Will, Mari, and Katie that are all here this evening as well. And thanks everyone for putting your territories in the chat as well. That's fantastic. So again, thanks for coming. What we're going to do today is, is typically our installment of Toast Talks. We get you out of here by 5:15. I'm going to share some updates on the redevelopment, some time for questions, but really dedicate today to storytelling and memories of the old building and the ministry that happened there. We did a bit of this in the summer, and there was just so much appetite and energy to share more. So we wanted to dedicate more space and time for that today. So thanks, folks. What a treat. What a treat to have all of you here. If you are on our email list, you would have hot off the press getting our newsletter. And in that newsletter, Carmen Lansdowne and I, we co-wrote a letter about the leadership transition, explaining it a bit more. And if you recall, a year and a half ago, Carmen left to be on sabbatical. I became the acting executive director. And then Carmen was named the moderator. I became the interim executive director. And then when Carmen is accepting an appointment, when she's done being the moderator as a professor, I was appointed as the permanent ED, whatever permanent means. And I was just recently at a community of faith on a Sunday speaking, and someone came up to me and said, Amanda, this is your 5th title that you've had since you've been there. And I'm so flattered that somebody was keeping track. But anyway, I really feel lots of gratitude and humbled to be in this role. I feel like I've been really welcomed and embraced. I feel supported by Carmen's legacy that has brought us to this point. And I truly want to say thank you for staying the course with us during this transition and aligning and sharing our vision where we can be a neighborhood where all are welcome and all people thrive. So there have been many significant years at First United. Many, and we're going to hear some stories from folks. But this is definitely a chapter, as we know, huge in our history. We have said goodbye to, and there's our photos, our well-worn but absolutely beloved building. This is actually our 4th building that we're about to embark on and build on this site. But we've built in other areas too. If you know our First United history, one of the very first churches we built was down the road, and it was finished in May of 1886. And if you recall some Vancouver history, the Great Fire was in June of 1886, a month later. But there we rebuilt again. That's what we do. We rebuild and adapt to the needs. And again, here we are rebuilding. And I look at these photos, and they carry a lot of weight. We know we're moving forward and rebuilding, but we know that so much beautiful ministry and important things and advocacy had happened in those walls. So we really do want to honor what we're seeing on the screen. And like I said, here we are rebuilding again. And truly, I believe this is our faith in action, as we say. You know, our faith in action as we respond in this neighborhood. Our response to the complexities of the issues we see in the downtown east side. You know, we say from the criminalization and racialization of poverty to homelessness, generational trauma, the overdose poisoning crisis. You know, we take action to repair, renew, and respond to these issues with dignity and compassion, to respond to this by rebuilding a facility to meet the current and future needs of this community where everyone belongs, respond to this by calling for justice to break cycles of poverty and oppression, and declare that housing is a human right and not a commodity. And we respond as a community here together. You in this room are part of the reason, part of the response. And we do this, we hope, with integrity and through your prayers and support. So thank you so much. Now this next, we have a bit of a demolition video we wanted to share with you, again, with reverence, knowing what occurred in the ministries in this building. And what we've done is across the street is we have a time-lapse video that's set up, which is fantastic. Our neighbors allowing us to do this at Atira. And we've been able to film different poignant moments in the construction. And so this is just a 1-minute video that we wanted to share with you. It's kind of world premiere, I guess. Great, thank you. And so what our timeline is still is we are projected to be complete in the fall of 2025. In this stage of our construction, we are just now finalizing what's called the excavation. We're about to pour the foundation and go from there. And like I said, in the fall of 2025, we're going to be done, which is super exciting. As far as fundraising goes, the cost of the project still maintain around $92 million. And we secured around 72 million of equity, which is incredible. We still, in our capital campaign, if you recall the original goal, it's expanded, but it's $37 million for our 4 floors of programming. And we've secured, we have just under 10 million left to go. We have 4 more years to get there. We're so thrilled with everybody's support and the momentum and the amount of equity that we've already secured for this building at this time of our construction. So thanks, many of you are part of the reason we are where we are today in our financial progress. So thanks. I did want to keep a couple of moments if people want to ask me a couple of questions about the redevelopment before we move on. I can unshare the screen maybe, or unshare the presentation. Yeah. And if I'm going to try and see a hand. If you want to put up a hand or use the chat function, whether I get to the question now or later, I will definitely be referencing it. Anyone have a burning question that isn't working on this project or
I just had one question.
Is this Connell?
Yes, it is.
Yes, go for it.
I just wanted to go ahead and mention that the cost of building things has skyrocketed in recent times. Is your budget accounting for the fact that getting a hold of any sort of tradesman is harder and longer and everything? I mean, I've been waiting nearly 18 months for the completion of a townhome, and now How is that affecting your project?
Yeah, so our original cost was $65 million. This is a couple of years ago, and now it's 92 million. That has taken into account the inflation, the rising cost of all the things, and has a much more robust contingency built into it. But the same sort of delays that people from any spectrum of building, from a skyscraper to your townhome, we have all experienced inflation, supply chain disruptions, labor shortage, et cetera. But we are on time. And the reason we're on time is that the asbestos that was no market's fault, but our own, gave us a year-long delay, which made everything else catch up. So I take a silver lining where I can. And who knew that asbestos would end up being not as bad as we thought it would be on the paperwork side of things. But yes, we want housing. We want housing now with no more delays. But it doesn't look to be like everything's on track. If anything, a month or two ahead of schedule, which actually probably shouldn't have just said that on the record, but anyway.
Take what you can get when you can get it. Yeah.
I'll take one more question. Oh, you're welcome. I'll take one more question before moving on. And like I said, the chat is such a great resource for you folks to pop in questions too, that we will follow up with you on. Oh, wonderful.
I think Peter Jones had his hand up.
Oh, thanks, Alice. Peter.
Peter Jones.
Thank you. I just wondered, as costs have escalated, whether some of the public sector partners have been receptive to increasing their share or contribution.
Yes, maybe. And in about a week, you'll know more about that. Dangle again, me on the record. Like I said, through the process of doing this work with the three levels of government. Oh, someone's not on mute, but something's on someone's counter. When we started this at $65 million, I mean, there was some progressive increase in the percentage that the governments were going to support this project. I just can't name the amounts yet, but I can in this month. Okay, thanks, folks. Again, please put your questions in the chat so we can leave time for some amazing storytelling. And before we move on to that, though, we have one short little wee video. We have commercials happening, and this is our PSA. It's just 30 seconds.
First United has served those in need in Vancouver's downtown east side for nearly 140 years. And right now, they need your help. In order to provide healing, community, connection, and care, and to address the complex issues facing this community, they're building a new facility at 320 East Hastings that will offer 40,000 square feet of inclusive, low-barrier services and amenities. If you feel like you can't do anything that will make a difference, you can. Help move First Forward by making a donation today at firstunited.ca.
Thanks. And just before I turn it over to some guests that we have in the room, here's also a look of some of the ad campaign that will be happening. You'll start seeing for November and December, really anchoring us in these terms around dignity, belonging, and justice. And of course, we know these aren't just words. These are actions and interventions that we believe we do and are doing in this community. When it comes to dignity, our human rights, from a human rights lens, the perspective of everybody has equal value, and the dignity of being able to access food, water, sanitation, hygiene, and homes. From belonging, where we are a community where all are welcome, where we create and facilitate space where people can come and just be, people can come and get spiritual care, healing, someone to listen to, but just come and be welcomed and build that sense of belonging. And then justice when it comes to our intervention of creating housing in a homeless crisis, the work that we're doing around our BC eviction mapping project, where we're data collecting across this province, what is creating evictions and homelessness, and trying to create law reform and recommendations to break that cycle of poverty. Basically, this world, as we know, is crying for justice every which way, and we cry for it here too in the downtown east side, and becoming poverty abolitionists in our work. with decades of activism, and the trust and the credibility that if we have as a gift in this community to take into systemic change, crying for justice. And so with that, I want to invite, we've teed up some speakers to share some stories, because we are not where we are in this work without some folks who have experienced that far before I was ever here, and many of the staff on this call were. And so we want to leave space and honor some of these. It looks like we're doing this in alphabetical order. And so
You first.
we're going to start with Bob Burrows. And so just to lay some container here, every speaker maybe 5 to 6 minutes, and we'll switch to the next. And if someone else in this Zoom room wants to share a story as well, please pop your name in the chat, and we'll see how many we can get to. And hey, if we need another Toast Talk installment of memories and sharing, then so be it. And I think that's beautiful. So without further ado, I think you're here, Reverend Bob Burrows.
Amanda, I've lost contact. Can you? I've gone back in. Wondered if you can let us in. We can hear you, but we've lost the visuals and.
Oh no! Well,
Yeah.
this is what's funny. We can see you both, John and Bob, sitting next to each other, and you're
All
matching.
right. Well then, okay. Well then, he'll just go
and
ahead.
your sound is impeccable.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks,
Okay.
team.
Well, greetings to everyone, and I can speak on behalf of the old building for most of its life, but it was 1 year old when I came to work there. Interestingly enough, in rereading the history of the building that's just been torn down, it was 11 and a half months from the time they left the old building until they dedicated the new building. So construction has expanded in time, and complications obviously with asbestos and other things. But just 3 or 4 of the highlights of the building that is no longer there. I think one of the significant things in the initial stage was that there were 3 congregations that met every Sunday morning at 11 o'clock: the Finnish language congregation, the German language congregation, and the English speaking congregation. And then we would all meet in the gym afterward for coffee and conversation and so on. But the Finnish chapel, the chapel was used by the Finnish congregation, and they had upwards of 60 or 70 people there every Sunday. And the German congregation was quite a bit smaller, 25 or 30. And we would have somewhere around 40 or 50 in the sanctuary. But that was one of the important things about that building. Then I think in 1969 and 1970, when the youth were traveling across the country and living on the streets, and there were all kinds of protests happening everywhere, we got a phone call from city officials that since the Jericho military buildings had been evacuated, all the young people that had been crashing there for several weeks or months, could we take 50 young men or older boys and provide accommodation and food for them. And so with the support of Jerry Bonham, the city's director of health, he said, sure, you've got good washrooms there, and I'm sure you'll be responsible. And so we had 50 people living there for about 3 months on the floor of the gymnasium. All they had was a mattress. I forget where we got the mattresses, and they got their meals made in the kitchen. But we took 50 males, and the YWCA took 50 females, and we were considered really good local citizens for responding to that. And eventually they moved out into other places. During the intervening years, there were a lot of programs for seniors. And that was after I had left First Church, but the seniors program seemed to be pretty strong in the 80s. Every every week there were seniors and a lot of volunteers to help and so on. And then in December of 2008, the incoming mayor, the night before he was inducted as mayor, phoned to see if the First United Church could, instead of having people sleeping on the pews during the daytime, which had been going on for some years, could become a shelter and take people in. And within a day or two, the oversight board at First United Church said okay, and the rest is the more recent history of the shelter dominating the space considerably. Anyway, those are just a few of the thoughts of the building. There are so many memories that individual members of the community would have and members of the staff, but it was I was there 8 years and they were great years and can never be replaced. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Oh, amazing. Thank you. Is Linda Irvin? Linda, did I see that you're here? Yes. Linda? I see so many emojis on screens because people are high-fiving you, Bob. Maybe Linda's not here.
I am here.
Oh, you are. Oh, hello. There you are. Oh,
Right.
apologies. Hi, nice to see you. Please
Right.
go ahead.
I was at First United Church from 1976 to 1987 for 11 years. And I just want to talk about several different kinds of things. I wanted to start out first by saying volunteers from all over Vancouver, New West, North, and West Vancouver. And we couldn't have done the work without those volunteers, and a great appreciation for the volunteers that came. I developed a program called the MAP program, Mission Assist Program, which was a training program for the volunteers that explored the roots and systemic issues of poverty. And it was based on the Canadian Urban Training Model, the CUT model, as some of you may know that are listening here. And so people did work around social, political, economic, cultural, feminist analysis. Why is there poverty? Why is there lack of housing? Answering those kinds of questions, looking at it through a lens of economics, cultural, and feminist, and political and social. Then developed a youth education program for the youth that came in from all over the Lower Mainland for a day or 2 days, and sometimes it was the Naramata Center that sent their Naramata Fall Spring program down to First United Church. And Jack Shaver and I initially did that facilitation, and then Brian Tejera and I co-facilitated after Jack stepped away. And I entitled a program called Treasure Hunt for Youth, and they came to see what First was about. Yes, they saw the food cupboard. Yes, they saw the clothing area, but we also worked with them around the roots of poverty, as we did with the other volunteers. And they would have to go out on the street in twos and ask Carnegie what they were about, ask the health clinic what they were about, ask Crabtree Daycare what they were about, and just kind of ask those questions and then come back. And then we would do kind of a reflection around that on what was happening and what was happening in their own communities and how that could relate back and forth. We did training. We trained many people to do advocacy, not just in First United Church, but some of our staff did travel to other areas to train people in advocacy. And we also worked very closely with the social workers and financial aid workers in the downtown east side. We formed a little bit of a unit. And Jane Wolverton, a financial aid worker, along with Dr. Adrian Ross and myself, did regular workshops on the need for housing and higher welfare. And it was a great trio, just doing education within the whole community of Vancouver. Bill Hennessy worked really hard to get what was then called the handicap pension. And that was a piece of work that Bill did a tremendous amount of work on. And we made presentations not only to congregations throughout the Lower Mainland, but also to various levels of governments. And we spoke then about guaranteed annual income, the need for housing, co-op housing, and we also talked with them in those days about mental health support. And First United Church Housing Society was formed. I was a founding member and first president of First United Church Housing, Social Housing, and we built 3 units in total, I think it was. And I now understand that that's been merged into another organization. One year we canceled Christmas. We developed a new date of July 25. Many people were getting ill. There's so much food around Christmas. It still kind of happens. People were carrying food around in their pockets and plastic bags and paper bags, and they would get sick from that. And I remember the ambulance driver telling me one day, "Why do you church people always have to do everything on the same damn day?" And I said, "Oh, okay, tell me more about that." And so we decided as a group at First United Church that we cancel Christmas and we'd move Christmas to July. Yes, we got flack about that, but we had Christmas in July and lots of people enjoyed it. They need food 365 days a year. That was my argument to the press and to anybody else that wanted to talk to me about it. I worked for the Christmas Bureau. First United Church handled Christmas Bureau. So the first year we did as the Christmas Bureau suggested, how much money the single man should get, how much money a family should get, and all families got the same amount of money. So the second year I decided to track that with how much rent everybody was paying, how many children, how many people were in a family, and how much income was coming in. And then we gave funds based on that data, which was not according to the Christmas Bureau's prescription. However, First United Church lost that little I don't know whether the contract, but we didn't do it anymore because they didn't like the way we did it. However, it was more just and more fair, and there was agreement from the staff at First United Church that we do it that way. What happened then was I was persuaded by the anti-poverty group in the Lower Mainland to give all that data to the United Way, which they used in their research for the downtown east side and throughout all of the Lower Mainland. It was data about rent that we had not had at that point in Vancouver. We also had a Christmas Eve service. I used to go to Christmas. We didn't have a Christmas Eve service, so I'd go to other churches for Christmas Eve, and it just didn't seem right. And so we developed Christmas Eve service, and we had people donate food. It was like an agape meal. And there was one man who gave me $100 every year to go buy smoked salmon, and another said, go buy some bagels. And we had a feast on Christmas Eve. People were invited to light candles. People were invited to put a decoration on the tree. It was like, we tried to make it kind of like a family Christmas. It was a great event. The place was always filled. Now, those of us that were part of First United Church worship services on Sunday and staff did not get the smoked salmon and bagels, nor should we. But the people in the downtown east side should have those, and they did. And it was just a fantastic evening with coffee brewing, and we ended it with lights out and all of us standing in a circle, holding hands, singing Silent Night. In 1983, the year the BC workers fought back, nearly shut down the province. If it hadn't been for Jack Monroe and Bill Bennett in a conference in Kelowna, a Sunday night talk those two had, resulted in the unions going back to work. And but they did it without consulting the community groups or churches that had worked so hard to bring this together. And we had such solidarity within the whole of British Columbia. We'd worked hard on that. There were women's groups, all kinds of groups that had worked on this. And we kind of, we were feeling pretty betrayed by those two men. But that evolved into End Legislative Poverty, and Jean Swanson and I became the official spokesperson for End Legislative Poverty BC. And we argued for guaranteed annual income, more housing, and we also did education around poverty. Many of us at First United Church would comment on the budget. Mine was to do the early morning radio show. I'm not an early morning person, but that was my assignment. And so when the federal budget dropped, the city budget dropped, the provincial budget dropped, we were there in those radio stations to comment on the budget. And I was usually doing that with one of the big investor groups in downtown Vancouver. And we formed a really great relationship. And he said to me one day as we walked out of the studio, he said, "Hey, Linda, what can we do together?" And I said, "Let's get together and let's figure out how we can use your money to build more housing and do more things in the downtown east side." He said, I'm in, let's do it. And then a few days later, I learned that he had ALS, and we never were able to follow that dream through. Beth Jennings can talk more about the handicap program, but twice a week they would have a program. I think it was twice a week, but a program of food and entertainment. And Beth is really great with music, and so she had various people involved in the music. And I believe there was a camp associated with that. Yes, we were all on staff, but we didn't know everything that everybody was doing all the time. This is one of the most fantastic things I think we did at First United Church. We had students, we had social work students, we had crim students, we had law students, and we had theology students. Can you imagine the conversations that would happen together with all those students? Can you imagine the results of what could happen? Because each of them had that kind of lived experience in the downtown east side. I was a supervisor of the crim and the law students. Jack Shaver did the theology students, and Beth did the social work students. And I was often asked to go to the law school at UBC to give a presentation on administrative law and how that worked. We had community connections. We were all part of either Carnegie Board or the Lookout Society. I chaired Lookout Society for a number of years. I was on the personnel committee at Carnegie. Jack Shaver used to be on the health board when it was there. And we were all involved, and also the agencies would come together once a month and figure out what we needed to do. This is another interesting thing that happened in the downtown east side. The RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, decided that maybe we should have a community bank. And so Martin Draper was the first manager of the bank, and he told me a story. He said, you know, the people that are on social assistance, they pay back their loans. The people that are not on social assistance have a more difficult time in paying back their loans. I always liked to share that little tidbit when I was out and about in the community talking about First United Church, because of the assumptions made that poor people don't do well with money or what have you. And then there are drugs and alcohol. So on a per capita basis, and I loved this tidbit when I would do my presentations, Dunbar area had the highest incident of use of alcohol and drugs. And then I think next was Kerrisdale, and then the downtown east side. It was not the downtown east side that had the highest percentage of alcohol and drug use on a per capita basis. So that's a short synopsis of my 11 years at First United Church. It was fascinating. It was a time of incredible growth for me. And it was a time where I began to realize how you can get governments to work for you. It takes a lot of work, but you can make it happen. A lot of dedication and a lot of, as my friend Brian Tejera said, look at Linda's address book and phone numbers. We didn't have email or text back then, but look at that stuff and you'll see all her contact, and don't take it away from her. Or if you do, you want to be able to use it. Anyway, that was quite wonderful years. David Smith, I see, is on the screen today. He was around in those times. David, I think you were on the board of First United Church back in the day. So it was there were moments of absolute fun and moments of absolute tears in those days. But I think we made some changes for the better for the people in the downtown east side. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. You did, and come move back and hang out with us in the work. You know, I'm going to follow up and ask you how long the July and Christmas went on for.
I can't remember. I think I left there. I went back to university. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your service and your deep activism in this community. The next, I believe, is Don Robertson here.
Yes, I'm here.
And hello.
Vertical. Yeah, I don't have the history of Bob has, because I'm a lot younger than Bob Burrows is. But I do remember going back to the 60s when I was invited down to speak at an evening service, and the congregation was pleasantly full. I think I was on CKLUX at that time. But I said to Amanda and Katie, rather than kind of talking about particular memories, that I'd like to kind of reflect with some poetic utterances. So I'm going to share those with you as they represent something of our history and something of the spirit of the place. The first one, I think one way people have of dealing with the downtown east side is to objectify people, basically, like dehumanize people. And then you really don't have to worry about it anymore once you've made objects of people. So I put this little limerick together. Ragged he looked to the furtive glance of a passerby. Ragged was the only tip needed. Perception like a click of a camera provided instant definition of who he is. Too lazy to work? Adding. What power is in our hands with an instant of defining? He will not easily escape the print developed by the camera click of first impressions. He's the many in the downtown east side heard about, read about, seldom thought about, too lazy to work, addict, click, just like the other ragged ones. What might it take to see the ragged one real? To set him free of the camera click? What might it take to know only and profoundly that he is a ragged child of God, just like the other ragged ones? What might it take to see the ragged one real? Hello, Fred. How's it going today? I know yesterday was a rough day for you. How'd your appointment go? There's coffee over there. Why don't we sit down and have a chat? What it takes to make the ragged one real is to adjust the camera lens. Click. One of the things about First United Church is over the years, they've been able to, and have always done, calling people by name. And that is incredibly important. So, a few years ago, we established the Social Justice Committee. And basically the purpose of the Social Justice Committee, you might guess, is to think about what belongs to who. And if you see that something that belongs to somebody else has been taken away from them, the purpose of the Social Justice Committee is to work at getting it back to them. So early in the life of the Social Justice Committee, I wrote this little poetic thing. It's based on an encounter of Jesus when somebody from the crowd yells out, would you arbitrate the contest between my brother and myself over an inheritance? And Jesus refused to do it. And this is how I saw that story back a few years ago with the Social Justice Committee. This story is about greed and a farmer who builds barns for gains he doesn't need. Even before the story is told, Jesus makes clear in words big and bold, while the farmer's crops thought to him credit was due, it's the good earth, Jesus said, it's not about you. With all these crops on hand because of the land, the farmer asked his soul, what shall I do? Almost before his question was through, he answered his own question. He knew what to do. Just a thought in passing. No sense of otherness here. That the farmer makes clear. No one else is he asking, nor does he consult on the answer to give. The way he makes sure the question and the answer is his. Build bigger barns is the answer he gives. Bigger is best, bigger and bigger. That's the test for success. That's just what you do. That's the game that is played. No doubt, that's true. So the barns brimmed with grain, he counted his gain. And the story goes that he tells his soul, "Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, put up your feet and have a beer." That wasn't in the Bible, but the farmer is successful in taking captive his soul. The weapon he uses is his bloated ego. He tells his soul what now he deserves to tell the soul. My goodness, what nerve. The story now takes a tragic turn. A lesson the farmer who asked and answered his own question will not live to learn. And he died, which was not in his plans. Dying with his feet up and a beer in his hand. It was supposed to be tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And not many people showed up to show their sorrow. Well, at the end of the story is a kind of new start. It's just what happens when we make our depart. Who will get barns number 1, 2, and 3? Who will get what the farmer said belongs to me? His brothers and sisters called out, "Those barns now are mine." Being rich before the Creator, Jesus said, is the new bottom line. So that was a little input for the Social Justice Committee back a number of years ago. Finally, in the 1970s, the staff at First United Church developed what I would think is probably a statement of faith, certainly, and a job description for themselves. And I thought it would be good to read that in terms of our history. So it was written back in the 1970s, and I've invited Elizabeth Kirkland to share this with me. Called the Lit Justice Seekers. Who are we who seek justice in the inner city?
We are the people who are called to journey in the inner city, a journey of faith, a journey of struggle and hope.
A journey of understanding and awareness, a journey of tears and songs, a journey of liberation.
We are the people who wedge open closed doors to let the fierce, justice-demanding spirit of the Creator blow through our lives.
We're the people who are challenged with others to look for and challenge sources of impression.
Who make places of comfort and safety where our neighbors can be made welcome.
We are the people who believe, as it is said by the ancient mystic, those who do not give to another what belongs to the other are not eating their own bread, but eating both their bread and the others.
We are the people who are called to listen to the voiceless, to stand in solidarity with the disenfranchised.
We're the people to align ourselves with the poor, to see Christ in all our sisters and brothers.
We are people who weep and laugh and struggle and sing. We are people who serve the inner city. We cry with our neighbors in distress, and they wipe away our tears. We link arms with the oppressed, and together we organize in the face of forces of oppression.
We pray for others, and they give us faith. We hold the drug addict in our arms, and she blesses us.
We stretch out our hand to a man in distress, and he gives us courage and hope. We open our doors to the homeless, and they bring their wisdom, courage, and love, and they find a home here.
We are here to listen, to struggle, to persist in the struggle for justice, and yes, to celebrate. Written by the staff of First United Church in the 1970s. Thanks very
Wow.
much, everybody.
Wow, poets in residency, powerful words. Thank you. Well, it's past 5:15, but we're gonna keep going, of course, dancing with our time here until about 5:30. So if folks need to go, please, but hope you continue with us because we've got Tim and Gary, I believe, are here. If you want to unmute, share a reflection with you. Thank you.
There we are. I was called to First United Church to be the congregational minister in 1989, and it was a most fabulous ministry time. The congregation was maybe 50 strong, and maybe half were from the immediate community, and found First United worship a safe place, an exciting place. Some were what they almost self-styled as refugees from other parts of the city, drawn because of their need to know more, and almost as if Dawn had said, to actually see people and to know what was happening. They came to, like Elizabeth Hart from the West Side, or from Frank called himself a refugee from West Van, seeking justice and connection. And this was 1989, and so members of the LGBTQ community were also welcomed and found a safe place at First United in the worshiping congregation. And I remember one incredible Sunday morning when David, who was transitioning as a transgendered person and knew herself to be Dana, arrived on Sunday morning and dressed as the woman she knew herself to be, and was applauded by the whole congregation when she was there. And they said, "Dana, welcome, welcome home." This was a congregation, tiny and in the downtown east side, but we, with the assistance of Leslie Campbell and Liz Bell, created an amazing Sunday school. And Tim's and my 3 daughters remember that time as being the most enjoyable church experience of their lives. But it did lead to interesting conversations, because the kids met in the back room where Wish usually held its evening activity. Wish, as you know, was the organization working with sex trade workers. And on the way home, one of our daughters leaned forward and said, "Dad, what is a bad trick list?" And we suddenly realized that Wish had forgotten to take down their list of bad tricks that were there with information to make sure the women could have as much safety as possible. And it was one of the more interesting post-church conversations that Tim and I had with our 3 daughters. And it sure helped all of us understand more of the reality of so many lives. We also started up, get this, an incredible church choir. And there were people with multiple gifts. 2 that I really remember, Linda and Chester, married happily together most of the time, which is about all any of us can say. They both lived with a lot of learning and mental disabilities. They couldn't remember any of the words, nor even the tunes of the songs we sang, but they would be in the front row, and they had a great sense of rhythm. And both of them had smiles that would crack even the most unhappy person into glowing delight and laughter. So they would stand there and they would sway back and forth in rhythm to whatever we were singing, smiling away. And you realize that this really was glory to God. And it took away the sense of performance being perfection, but performance being the offering of the heart and the joy therein. We had a Wednesday night Bible study. And I realized one of my major tasks wasn't just to facilitate conversation, it was to bring a massive crock pot full of chickpea stew and rice so that we could all eat, and we could then pay attention more to conversation. And I recognized then that the way we interpreted so many of the stories, particularly parables and gospel stories of Jesus, was radically different than any interpretation that I had done in other churches in other parts of the city or out in the interior. That these folk here who gathered from the community had a unique perspective. They were the ones where Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor, for you shall see the face of God. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are those who are in tears." And you saw blessing, and you saw people demanding justice and working for a contextual theology, though we wouldn't have used such fancy language. And it was for me a revelation of the power of Scripture to inspire. We also needed to be a community that was ready for the unexpected in worship. And that happened frequently and often. But one moment that stands out, I'm in the middle of, I'm fully launched into what I thought was a fascinating sermon. And suddenly a visitor appeared at the back, walked in and directed himself immediately towards the piano, sat down, glanced at me as if looking for permission, though it was clear nothing I said or did was going to stop him from whatever was going to happen. And he immediately began playing the piano. And it was incredibly beautiful music. And so we simply waited, paused, and listened and felt our souls be moved. After about 3 or 4 minutes, he finished. He stood up and said, "Thank you." And I responded the same way and said, "Well, thank you." And he got up and walked out. And we realized that we had been blessed with beauty and that this was a sacred moment. Somebody said, well, the meaning of angel is messenger. I just think we were visited by a messenger. It had the sense that worship was truly organized but spontaneous, had room for people of many different gifts, was always a place of welcome and celebration, a place also where the cries and the needs for justice were heard. We weren't always a powerful group, by no means, but we did what we could. We said thanks be to God, and we worked for and hoped for and prayed for the coming of the kingdom of God, where everybody would be beloved and worth everything. So I carry those memories. I could tell you a lot more, but I think I'll stop. I think Tim is probably the last person, and his computer froze and was not mine. But I just need to share one little bit that the congregation came to a final resting time in the year 2007. And so it had an incredible experience in life. And now things are different and things are changing, and that's as it should be. But my memories are rich and dear. So thank you, Amanda, for this opportunity to share.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You said a statement around our souls were moved, and which was beautiful. That's what I'm experiencing here. And why is it almost 5:30? Thanks, everyone. No one wants to leave. I love it. You can hang out with us all night. Is Tim's tech ready?
I'm here.
Hi.
We're good.
Well, this is really special for me to be here, and I must say it's wonderful to see Linda Irvin. I haven't seen Linda for a very long time, and she was instrumental in bringing me to First United back in 1982. So my story at first started with my entry at the Vancouver School of Theology. I'd been away from the United Church for many years because I was openly gay, and the churches, any churches at that time, were not welcoming at all. But I wanted to study theology, and I went into VST. I'm getting a note from Gary's telling me to look up at the camera. I wanted to study theology, so I entered VST as an openly gay person. And I was first to do so there. So it was quite a unique experience. But after a short time, I felt that I was possibly being called into ministry. And at that time, I went to hear a sermon by Jack Schaefer, and he preached about returning to the rock from which you were hewn and the quarry from which you were dug, which is Isaiah. And I thought, I'm getting a message here to go back to my home congregation and let them know that I want to at least explore going into ministry. And so I went back to my home congregation, which was St. David's United Church in West Vancouver, and they didn't actually throw their arms open to me. Back in 1982, it was a very, very difficult thing for them. And after a year, they told me that they really didn't think it was possible for them to sponsor me. And I was pretty depressed by that. And then all of a sudden, and I mentioned to a couple of people, I got this wonderful call from Linda. who said, why don't you come to First United? I think First United would be able to sponsor you, but why don't you come and see? And so I did. And I arrived in 1982 and made a presentation to the board. And then all of the board members wanted to meet and talk with me and come to some understanding about what being gay was like and what it meant for the church and so on. And after about a year, they unanimously voted to sponsor me for ministry and then asked me if I would go on the board. Now, John Kishore was the superintendent at the time, and Jack Shaver was the congregational minister. And of course, they had to stick handle lots of reactions from lots of people. And they did that well, along with Linda, who always there was very supportive. And so I continued on for a number of years on the board at first, and worshiping at first, and being sponsored by First, and then finally in 1992, 10 years later, I was ordained. But by that time, Gary had been called, and so now not only was I involved my own self, but of course I was now the minister's wife, or the minister's spouse that showed up and did all those kind of things that one's asked to do as a spouse. And for instance, I love to cook turkeys, and I cooked many turkey dinners there as part of the role that I saw as the spouse for the minister, and was involved in all kinds of programs. And then eventually, of course, I left because I had my own congregation after I was ordained, although many of you know that story, had its ups and downs and so. So there's just a brief time, but to say that First United Church was the first congregation in all of Canada to sponsor an openly gay person for ministry. No one else would touch it. There were a couple of others at the same time, about the same time in Ontario, that were trying and failed. But here in Vancouver with First United, and of course they guided that through the whole process into Presbytery, which voted. And Presbytery, believe it or not, back then voted unanimously. Some of the people who disagreed didn't vote, but the vote then was unanimous. And then of course it went on to the national level, and we all know that story. So I owe my ordination to First United Church, and First United Church, in so many things, as we know, is on the front lines, and they have been on the front lines for the gay, lesbian, bisexual community. Well, GLBTQ, all the letters now that have become associated. And so I'm very grateful to First, and it certainly shaped me and shaped my ministry. Much greater depth of understanding of liberation than I had before. And so I will always be grateful. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. My soul has been moved. I hope others has as well. There's never enough time. We'll have to keep sharing stories again every time we meet. I love that this can become a practice. I don't know really what else to say. I have some business to end on, but I do feel so humble because I am in this role. And whenever I hear these stories, I just, it's not lost on me, the legacy and the context that we work in. We continue to work in crying for justice as well. So we have an Advent series. I'm just going to end on this. An Advent series starting in December. Oh, an Advent series starting in December. Who knew? Anyway. But it's a new one with Lauren, our Indigenous spiritual chaplain, and what she's done is Call to Justice, the 18.17, and it's all around National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. There is a calendar posted, and every day there is a challenge or an engagement opportunity, and there will be like a study group every Friday online that she'll be facilitating. So please look out for that. And we'll be circulating more of that info. And without further ado, we have a draw for bread. One of our amazing sponsors, Terra Bread, is going to give away a gift card, I believe. And someone in the background is doing something to do a draw. It's not me. And I will invite Katie Conkin, our Director of Communications and Development, to announce the winner, I believe.
Yeah, so we've pulled a random draw from all of our attendees here tonight, and Barbara Gregg, you have won a $25 gift card to Terra Breads. Are you still here, Barbara?
Yes, I am.
Oh, amazing. Fantastic. Well, congratulations. And our staff.
Oh, that's incredible.
Our staff will be in touch with you tomorrow to coordinate that, make sure that we have your address on file, and we'll pop that in the mail for you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and everyone, we're gonna end. Please take yourself off mute if you like, and let's be loud and chatty and go with peace and say goodbye to each other. Thanks so much for attending today. This was our record-breaking attendance, actually. In our year we've been doing this.